Okay, so I'm speaking today. I'm going to be continuing with our Old Testament kind of characters. But when Ian messaged me this week, he said, "Who's speaking?" And I said, "Me." And he said, "Have you got a top 10? And I said, "Yes." So we do try to do a little bit of a top 10 every now and again, just to kind of get a bit of discussion going amongst you as a congregation. So the top 10 today is cartoons from our era. So I'm using the word "our" in a very, very general kind of way, okay? So it's cartoons from our era. So you're going to have a minute to kind of come up with what you think will be on the top 10 list of cartoons from around about our era, okay? So get into little kind of just groups, and you've got a minute to just kind of discuss what you think is going to come. The top 10 cartoons from our era. It might not be what you used to watch, it might be what your kids used to watch. Okay, you've got about 30 seconds left. 30 seconds. So nice discussion going on. We've got the last 10 seconds, and then we're going to find out what is in the top 10. And 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So here is the top 10 cartoons from kind of our era. And when I say our era, it's more kind of me and my brothers. So I did kind of check it out with my older brother to see whether this could be his list, and he was approving. So here we go. Number 10, Thundercats. Anybody remember Thundercats? Yeah, that goes up. Yeah, you like that Thundercats action. Thundercats. Oh, that's number 10. Number 9, He-Man.
Yes.
All boys. I asked my brother, I'm sorry, you know. Say, He-Man. Yes. Anybody have any other He-Man characters when you were a kid? Yeah. Do you have? You had Skeletor? Yes. There we are. See, lovely. Number 10. 8. Number 8, here we go. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There we are. It's a very popular. What's that?
You remember always having these like tattoo stickers?
Oh, yeah.
I don't just get them.
There we are. Fantastic. Okay, a proper label as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Here we go. Number 7. Danger Mouse. So the British one in there. Penfold. That's it. Yeah. He was the real hero, wasn't he? If we're honest, like Danger Mouse took all the credit, but really it was Penfold. Okay, here we go. I think this is number 6. SpongeBob. It's a bit mooted, that one. It's a bit mooted. People not so fussed. No? Right, let's move on quickly then. Next one is the Flintstones. Dabba-dabba-doo. There we are. Yes, indeed. So did you know that there's a difference between people who live in Oman and people who live in Abu Dhabi? The people in Oman don't like the Flintstones, but the people in Abu Dhabi do. If Charlotte was here, she'd be wetting herself. Charlotte, that's for you, right? Alright, the next one is
Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo! Scooby-Doo! Everybody else Scooby-Doo? Classic? Absolutely classic. Okay, we've gone to the big money ones now. These are the really important. I think this is the top 3, so here we go. The Simpsons! Eerily prophetic, The Simpsons, predicting the future. It's really, really scary how they managed to do that, but impressive. Number 2, the Looney Tunes! Bugs Bunny and all that kind of stuff. Yeah? For most of us, that's how we learned classical music, was watching Looney Tunes, because they play that in the background. So it's a bit of culture as well. Bit of culture. And number 1, what's going to be number 1 then, people? What's going to be number 1? Mickey Mouse? Maybe a mouse.
Tom and Jerry.
It's Tom and Jerry! Yes, indeed. Bit of violence there. That was about that. Bit of violence there. Can't get rid of that. Yes, can you? Yes, indeed. So, that's just... What's that? They're part of the Looney Tunes. See, it's up there, man. See? It's all encompassed in the Looney Tunes. There's loads of them there. Alright, then, so, Tom and Jerry. So, it just gets to a bit of talking, and there'll be a tenuous link to that coming up in the talk a little bit in the future. Right then, so today's person that we're going to be looking at, when he was called by God, said these words, "Oh my Lord, please send someone else." So God called this person, and his response was, God, please send someone else. Not me. Moses, look at that. Yes, indeed. So did you know it by the Kohaths or by the Exodus that kind of give it away?
Yes, I will be in Exodus.
Fantastic, yes. So we're looking at Moses today. He's the character. And as you can see, the pyramids were there, and the camels and stuff like that. Someone told me on Friday at Jack Lewis, top tip, if you're going to go to Egypt, speak Welsh, okay? Because they can't understand it and they won't ask you for money. If you speak English, they're asking for cash. So if I ever go to Egypt, I'm just going to be quoting Callum Martin. So anyway, there we go. So, Neath. I was born in Neath when I was small. And then I moved to the Midlands. So I moved to a tiny little village called Cosby. And I moved there when I was 2. But what my mum did was she made sure that I knew that I was from Neath and that I was Welsh. So I knew that the Neath rugby team were the All Blacks, that they wore black, and they wore the white Maltese cross as well. So I knew that I was from Neath and I was Welsh. So we would come back here on holidays and stuff like that in half terms, would visit family to try and maintain my Welsh heritage. So coming up on the screen now is my school photo from when I was a kid. And I was 7 or 8. Anybody can pick me out or not? It's too small? Well, I'll tell you, because I'm short, I'm always on the front row. That might give you a little hint. That's it, third from the right, that's me in my mum's knitted Welsh dragon jumper. I had a Welsh dragon jumper, because I was from Wales, see? To remind me that I was Welsh. I was from Wales. So, if my mum was around now, she would love the knitting group. She'd probably knit me another one then, so I don't know what happened to it. But, so that was me, in school, in Cosby, in Leicester, where they say, alright, my duck. And that's where my dad still lives now. But that's where I grew up. And in the same way, Moses, alright, I was inspired to do Moses from Charlotte's talk. She did an excellent talk a couple of weeks ago on Miriam. Miriam was Moses' big sister. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Moses, and that's the original Moses basket there, the first of its kind in the world. It's amazing, isn't it? There we are. Someone should market that for selling. Maybe they did. So that's Moses there, and that is one of Pharaoh's daughters. Now there was the Pharaoh kind of made an edict that all the children, all the firstborn boys were going to be killed. So what Moses' mum did was she made a basket, put like tar in and stuff like that to make it waterproof, and then hid it in the reeds for there. And then when Pharaoh's daughter then went to kind of bathe, she heard this baby crying, found Moses, and she thought, I can't look after this baby on my own, let's get someone else. And Miriam just happened to be there and said, I know someone who can look after him for you. And she goes and gets Moses' mum. So he gets raised in Pharaoh's court, so he gets raised as an Egyptian, but he always knows that he is a Hebrew, right? He is a Hebrew. So you might be raised in nobility and in the posh places and learning the Egyptian kind of way of things, but he knows that he's a Hebrew. It says this literally in the book of Hebrews. So if you have the New Testament, towards the end of the New Testament, there's a book called Hebrews, and it says this in chapter 11. It was by faith that Moses, when he grew up, so when he grew up there means when he was about 40, right? When he grew up, he refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to share the oppression of God's people instead of enjoying the fleeting pleasures of sin. He thought it was better to suffer for the sake of Christ than to own the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to his great reward. So what that's saying there is, it would have been really easy for Moses just to live the royal life, just to get stuck in with everybody else and enjoy what was going on. But instead, he identified as being a Hebrew, right? I'm going to read Exodus 2. Tell you what, this is a lovely bookmark. Whoever did this, tell you what, bang you, something. Right then, so Exodus chapter 2. So we're picking up from when Moses had grown up. So chapter 2, verse 11 onwards, it says this. One day, after Moses had grown up, so bear in mind he's probably about 40 now, right? He went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labour. So his own people, they were distant from where he was going to live in, because he was in Pharaoh's courts, at hard labour. So they were slaving away there, right? He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew who was one of his own people. Glancing this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Who knew that Moses was a murderer? Biblical hero, but a murderer. Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. The next day, he went out and he saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, "Who made you rule and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered the flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "Where is he?" he asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him? Invite him in to have something to eat." So Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. That's easy, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? You only have to defend someone's daughter, you can have her in marriage. It's not bad, is it? I worked a lot harder than that, I tell you. But it's all worth it. He gave his daughter Zipporah in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses called him Gershom, saying, "I have become an alien in a foreign land." But during that long period, which is another 40 years, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up before God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. So, Moses sees an Egyptian battering an Israelite, murders him. Kind of like this guy. Scrappy-Doo. Remember him? Now, there's a reason why, when we did Scooby-Doo earlier, he doesn't come up on the picture. Because he's really annoying. He's really annoying. Even as a kid, I hated Scrappy-Doo. So, let me at him. Like, he's got like small man syndrome, like me, do you know what I mean? Thinks he's harder than he is. Well, that's what Moses was like, right? He wants to take things into his own hands. He sees an Egyptian battering a Hebrew, just gets stuck in them, do you know what I mean? Takes him out, buries him up, hides him away, and that's his character. He's passionate for his people. He still identifies himself as a Hebrew, even though he's raised in Pharaoh's courts. But what happens then? He's found out. He has to leg it. He disappears then into the desert. Defends some 7 daughters of the priest, and ends up getting married. It's not bad, is it? But then for the next 40 years, he's a shepherd. So on one hand, he takes things into his own hands and he thinks he's going to save his people. But then, that's not the plan. He's going to disappear for 40 years. So, in terms of some stats about Moses, his name literally means to pull out or to draw out of water. So he was given the name by Pharaoh's daughter. He may have been given another name by his own mother, we don't know that. But in terms of Pharaoh's daughter, she called him Moses because he was drawn out of water. He was adopted into the nobility, and he murdered an Egyptian when he was 40. He spent 40 long years as a shepherd. 40 years. Imagine that. I mean, you know, Ray, how long were you doing a job that you were doing?
40 years.
40 years, yeah. 40 years. Long time, isn't it? It's graft. Yeah? 40 years in the desert. And at about 1446 BC, at the age of 80, he led the Exodus. He led the people out of Egypt. So he potentially thought he was going to do that as a younger man, as a 40-year-old. But God had different plans for him. 40 years later, he went from fighting and taking matters into his own hands to when God finally called him. And what did he say to God when he called him? God, please send someone else. Now that's a change, isn't it? From, let me at him, come on, figure hard enough to move, and all that, to, God, please, just send someone else. It's not me, do you know what I mean? I can't do it. Yeah? But that's the very time that he was ready for God to send him. When he thought, do you know, I can't do this. It's not for me. One of the things I love about some of our leaders here at Grace Church, particularly Charlotte and Emma, when the leaders at the time approached them to say, do you know, I think you'd be ideal as leaders in this church, they both said, I don't think it's for me. I can't, it's not, I'll give it a go, but they had that humility about them. I've been around other people who think, you should pick me. I'm the best leader you've got in this church. I'm the best. You should be picking me. I should be a leader. Do you know what I mean? Pushing themselves forward. And they're the very people that you think, really? Okay, that's interesting. I'd rather have someone who's humble than someone who's full of themselves, like, do you know what I mean? He had 40 years of growing up in Pharaoh schools, 40 years in the desert, and then 40 years of leading the people. There's an advert on TV that says something like this. Born in Swansea, made in the Royal Navy. Yeah? Well, this guy, Moses, was born in Egypt, but he was made in the desert. That was his training ground, his desert ground. It must have been rough, to be fair. Looking after sheep for 40 years. Wandering around the same areas for 40 years. And then having 40 years of leading 2 million people through the desert. 2 million people who whinged and moaned and wanted to stone him. But he did it for 40 long years. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. So, back to that picture there. I think there's an actor that he looks like. I'm not sure whether this is an AI generated kind of picture, but this is where God kind of called Moses when he was in the burning bush, right? Moses going about his business as ever, watching the sheep, and God calls him from the burning bush. And if Moses is intrigued, he goes over to the bush because you can see this bush is on fire, but it's not burning up. It's just continually burning. And the great thing with Moses, as you look at him, it inspires some great artwork. I tell you, look at this. Parting of the Red Sea. It's an epic picture, that, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Imagine being 80 years old, alright? You take people out of Egypt, and there's the massive exodus. You see all these different signs and wonders. You get to the Red Sea, and it's all in front of people there. The army are chasing behind you. 2 million people start saying, oh, you brought us into the desert to die! And they're going to stone him. And then God says, no, stick out your rod. So he sticks his rod or his staff out, and then the sea parts, 80 years old. It's incredible, isn't it? The next one then, get the 10 Commandments. And again, another epic bit of artwork. Moses did some amazing things for God, but he did it when? After he was 80. Yeah? Right. One verse I love about Moses says this in Exodus 33. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. It doesn't say that about anybody else in the whole of the Bible, only Moses. Moses was that highly esteemed by God that God would allow him to see him face to face, and speak with him face to face. And it says that when Moses met with God, his face would shine, and people could tell that he'd been with God. So much so, he had to put a veil over his face because people were like, oh, the glory of God is on you, don't you? I long for that. I long for us to meet with God in such a way in here that we can't stand up or something, or can't whatever, but that we've met with God and people can see it, In the New Testament, in the Gospel of John, so you've got Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. In John chapter 10, verses 14 to 16, Jesus describes himself as the Good Shepherd. So similar to Moses being a shepherd, Jesus is the Good Shepherd. And he says in that his sheep, which is us, will recognise his voice. And that's one thing that marks us out as being Jesus' disciples, is that we could hear from God. But we still don't get to see him face to face like Moses did. What an honour that was. He saw him face to face. But he relied on God wholeheartedly. And God did amazing things with Moses' character. An example of that is this. In Exodus 11 verse 3, it says, the Lord gave the people favour in the sight of the Egyptians. So when he says the people there, they mean the Hebrews, right? So even though they were slaves, they were given favour. Moreover, the man, Moses, he wasn't just a man, he was the man, the man. The man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people. He was esteemed. People thought he was great. They thought he was fantastic. God had elevated him to a point. Now he was just a humble shepherd. And yet God had lifted him up, right? And he'd have this amazing status with everybody. People respected him. There was a sense of like awe around Moses. However, Moses didn't view himself as being great all round. It says this in the book of Numbers. So in the Old Testament, you've got the first few books, the Pentateuch. It says Moses himself was very humble, more so than any other human being on the face of the earth. He was a humble man. So he went from, in his 40s, come on, let's have it, to God, please send somebody else, because he was humble. 40 years in the desert looking after the sheep had humbled him. It changed his character. It made him a leader that was required to do the job. And when I sat down with Brian Farr, because he's the guy I go to kind of for mentoring and kind of encouragement and sharpening and stuff, he said when he was leading Parklands Church, the phrase that he would use is, I'm the first among equals. So everybody's the same on the same level, but because I'm the leader, the buck stops with me. So I'm no more special than anybody else, but the buck has to stop somewhere. And I kind of take that as inspiration for the way that we kind of do church here. Years and years ago, when we were in the treetops, so this is years and years ago, I had a t-shirt on that said the word relentless across it. Now it's for like an energy drink that I wouldn't recommend anybody drink, and I certainly haven't drunk it myself. But I just wanted to have a t-shirt on that says that I am relentless. I will not be stopped, you know, go with that. And on the back it said the word crew, because it was a t-shirt from a bar, basically, that I managed to buy off eBay. And Phil Meisen, who was part of the church at the time, he's watching me put the PA together, and he said, you shouldn't say crew on the back there, you should say leader. But that's not who we are. We're all about everybody's exactly the same. Do you know what I mean? There's no one person better than the other. It's no pastor this, pastor that, pastor the other. We're all equal. Yeah? But I'm the first among equals, because the buck has to stop somewhere. So it's about being humble and realising that everybody is great. Yeah? Now, it wouldn't be a Byron Weasley talk without an American football quote. So I chuck this one in for you, okay? So, one of the greatest players who ever played, a guy called Walter Payton, said this. When you are good at something, you'll tell everybody. When you're great at something, they'll tell you. When you're good at something, you tell everybody. You see this? You see how we did that? Do you know what I mean? But when you're great at something, people will tell you. And that's the difference. Yeah? Because character matters. And that's my next stream here. After 40 years of shepherding sheep, Moses had become a man of character, and character matters. Jesus said this in Luke 16, if you are faithful with little things, you'll be trusted with much. If you are faithful in looking after whatever it is you've been called to do, and you do a good job, you'll be trusted with much. It's the parable of the 10 talents. In terms of me having to go leading Grace Church now, this didn't happen just, as soon as I started. I had 14 years with Sarah leading a house group in the church. 14 years. And I had 10 years of leading the worship team. I had to be faithful in those things to be entrusted with more. Do you know what I mean? I had to prove myself faithful. And some of the words on here, respect. Have a respect for other people, especially people who serve you. Yeah? So, thinking of, like when we go every Christmas to the Toby Carvery, do the staff there think, oh, fab, it's that church coming again, they're brilliant. Or do they think, oh, no, not them again. They're an absolute flipping nightmare, do you know what I mean? How do we behave with people? Do we show them respect, especially people who serve us? Yeah? Honesty in all things. Do we tell the truth? Now, yesterday I was cutting my garden hedge. I leaned over a bit too far because I tried to do like the inside of next doors as well. I ended up cutting Phil's hose. I confessed to Phil. I said, Phil, I owe you a new hose, really. But I could have ducked and dived and got my head down and not said anything. But it's important to be honest in the little things as well. Yeah? And that's what not to bring up politics and stuff, but that's what does my head in with politicians. Sometimes when they make a mistake, just say, yeah, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, put my hand up to it. Rather than, well, yeah, and there's always like a busted bit. It's nonsense. I don't respect that at all. The next one, responsibility. Can you be trusted? Kindness to literally anyone and everyone, not just people who are kind to you. That's easy. Jesus said that's easy. Just be kind to people who are not so kind to you. And integrity, the last one. Do you walk the talk and talk the walk? Yeah? Do the things match up? Do you talk a good game or do you actually live it out? Why is this important? Because you and I, we represent Jesus to people. Wherever we go, we represent Jesus. I love the fact that I go to a group with one of my colleagues, with one of the neighbours. So Margaret can report back to me exactly what I'm like. Do you know what I mean? Or I love the fact that my kids came to the church. It could be very easy for Dad to say in the front one thing, but in the house they know something completely different. Do you know what I mean? But am I a man of integrity? There's a famous quote that says, "You may be the only Bible that people ever read." Yeah? So it's important that we represent Jesus and we represent him well. The last thing I would want is for people to say, "They're not going to that for the church. You see how they are. They're awful, they are." Yeah? Character matters. Who you are matters. A US basketball coach, John Wooden, says, "Worry about your character, not your reputation. Your character is who you are, and your reputation is who people think you are." Worry about what's in here, yeah? And how we change this. 40 years in the desert, Moses spent, having his character refined by God. 40 years of grinding, doing the difficult stuff, doing the stuff that nobody ever sees. But that's what made him ready to be the leader he was. So it says that he was the most humble man who ever walked the earth. Humility is the quality or condition of being humble, modest opinion or estimate of one's own importance, rank, etc. A humble person does not think less of themselves, but thinks about themselves less. So it's not you putting yourself down endlessly. "Oh, I'm rubbish, I'm this and that and the other." Because that's you being preoccupied with yourself again, do you know what I mean? But it's just about you thinking about other people first, putting them first. Moses was so humble, in Exodus 32, where God wanted to wipe everybody out, he says, "God, blot me out," and save them. He was 2 million people, he was going to take it for them instead. Blot me out. And that is like a shadow of Jesus, a foretaste of what Jesus did, you know, for all of us. Moses, the most humble man who ever lived. Blot me out. That's amazing. So, what can we learn? We can learn that there is power in submission and greatness in humility. That really flies in the face of our world. Our world is all grabbing this and grabbing that and trying to step over other people to be promoted and all this kind of stuff. It didn't work like that for Moses. It took him 40 years in Pharaoh's court, 40 years wandering in the desert looking after sheep, to then be the leader that he was called to be. We can learn that we can either do this the hard way, or we can do it the hard way. There is no easy way. There is no shortcut to character. It's the hard yards. It's putting in the effort. It's being consistent. It's making those difficult decisions when other things would be easier. It's not choosing to be in Pharaoh's court. It's identifying with your own people. So I mean, it's choosing those difficult things. The question is, are you in a desert stage? In your life, do you think, "Oh man, I'm just wandering around here. Just wandering around 40 years. What's going on?" Do you know what I mean? If you are, embrace that time. Don't be in a hurry to push yourself forward to try and elevate yourself. God will lift you up in your right time. He's got a plan and a purpose for each and every one of us. And the last thing then is, God wants to mould and shape you using your character, your gifts, and your skills. So with Moses, he was passionate about his people, but he was a bit misguided. It took him 40 years to learn a different lesson, and he was just as passionate for his people then, but he was a bit more salted with them. And I liken this to Paul, a fellow who wrote the majority of the New Testament. Before he met with Jesus, he was out there killing Christians, giving approval to kill Christians. He was zealous for God, thinking he was doing the right thing. He met with God, God changed his heart completely, but he was still zealous and passionate. He's the same kind of gifts and skills. God wants to use the gifts and skills that you already have. He doesn't want to radically change you into somebody else. He loves you as you are. He does want to work on your character. He does want to work on your heart. Now yesterday, I had the honour of going to a celebration of somebody's life. This fellow called Peter Ware. Now Peter, I didn't actually know him pretty much at all really, but I knew his son, Andrew, and a couple of other of his siblings. And Andrew came here to where we opened the building and kind of dedicated it. And I speak sometimes in his church. And the way that Peter was described in the funeral yesterday, you could tell that he had immense character. Immense character. And I sent a message, Andrew sent me a message saying, thanks so much for coming today, really appreciated it. And I said, although I never really knew your dad, I've benefited from his character through his kids. Because the legacy lives on. And I'm hopeful that if I'm a man of character, that my kids will do the same. Do you know what I mean? Now, they pick up the best and the worst of me, clearly. And the example I often give is when they were small, and I'd be driving in the car, and you see a runner go in and past on the street, and we go, go on, Sam, go on. And you get a little voice from the back seat, go, go on, Sam. You think, oh, done that, do you know what I mean? And then you get to a roundabout, and the person in front hasn't gone yet, and you almost rear-end them. And then you get a little voice from the back going, come on! Not so great, not so great. So the kids will get the best and the worst of you, but if you demonstrate good character, chances are they'll pick some of that up, you know? So next week, I'm going to another celebration of someone else's life. A mate of mine who passed away in February. And, can't get emotional now, I've got to speak at this video. But in readiness for going next week, I read my journal from the year out that I did with this fella, because me and him, we played in a band together in 96, 97. And so I was reading through the journal, and it starkly made me think of how judgmental I was and religious I was, aged like 19 and 20. I was zealous for God, passionate for God, which is why I did this year out. But I was so religious, it was unreal. You know, I'm like, right, I'm not buying anything on Sunday. If I need petrol, I'll go the last thing Saturday night, I'm not buying. Do you know what I mean? I was flat out, like, really. But then I had and you could read it even over the space of a year. How God kind of really opened my eyes a bit to grace and stuff like that, you know, and how I changed. But when you look back, you think, oh, you know, that's not the man I want to be. It's not the man who I identify with now. Hopefully now I'm just as passionate as I ever was. I'm still in love with Jesus. I'm still, well, we are, wherever I go, you know. But hopefully I'm more grace-filled now, and God's working on my character. But it's a work in progress, do you know what I mean? And I want to embrace the kind of the desert with God and go where that leads me. So, Chloe's just going to put a little bit of background music on, if that's all right. And what I want us to do in response is I want you to give yourself to God afresh as the music plays. Okay, just do some business with God. And whether you're in a desert place at the minute, or whether you're not, just give yourself afresh. And because God can use any and every season of your life, okay? And then I want you to identify any areas of your life that you think are either driven by your ego, your desire to be known, to be liked, to have influence and all of that, or insecurity, thinking, oh, do you know what, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that. And then give them to Jesus as well. Because God wants to use your heart, He wants to use your character, He wants to use the gifts and skills that you have. And He'll give you opportunities all the time. And it's about using those opportunities to grow. So let's just spend some time in the quiet now with the Lord, offering up ourselves to Him afresh.